So welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, Sarah Spier, right?
Spier, close.
Spier, Sarah Spier.
One of the two.
And I know you as Follow the Poppy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just throw it over to you to sort of explain, why is that your name, or why have you taken that on as sort of your Instagram profile type person being?
Yeah, so Follow the Poppy is a new platform and it's completely dedicated to opioid use disorder. And I came up with the name because I actually originally was going to make a film where I tracked opioids around the world and kind of the international system, and everything stems from the poppy. So that's where the idea of Follow the Poppy came from. You know, something as beautiful as this flower is a global phenomenon and just wreaks havoc in people's lives. So that's kind of the imagery and the idea behind Follow the Poppy. I actually used to work in film, so that's why I was going to make the documentary, but then life took some different turns and I've just been working in the field and doing a lot of system work, and that's why I've just decided to start Follow the Poppy utilizing social media. I'm starting my own podcast also and doing more research and program development on opioids. So that's where that came from.
Well, let's delve into that a little deeper, if you don't mind. You've had some firsthand experience with some poppy type
substances.
So if you don't mind, let's say why you've taken an interest in this.
Yeah, I always say that I'm an expert on two different levels. First and foremost, field experience. I had quite an extensive heroin addiction. So, you know, I also was addicted to prescription pills, which really kind of started before my heroin addiction. Not so much opioids, but Xanax and Adderall, you know, just really that pill culture. And I fell in love with a boy when I was young, which, I mean, it's either the girl or the boy. I mean, you work in the field, most addictions, it's all in the brain. And so oftentimes we're addicted to people, places, things, you name it, will form an attachment in our brain. And so mine really went together with an addiction to a man. And I don't even want to say a man, it was a boy. We were in high school. I was a good girl. He was a bad boy. And really that relationship ended up driving me into the world of heavy illegal substances. And so he went to prison for quite some time, and really he went to juvie. I was with him, but I never did drugs when we were young. It was after I had been hired and worked in film. I have like a crazy story and it goes in so many different ways, but I worked for the Coen brothers and I worked on No Country for Old Men. I worked with Josh Brolin and his production company. And I had this amazing film career very young at like 18. And so I come from female filmmakers. And so I was hired young with the Coen brothers, and Brad Pitt's makeup artist was my mentor. And so I used to do makeup for films. And while I got hired for No Country for Old Men, my boyfriend at the time was sent to prison. Finally, he had had his last probation violation and, you know, robbed somebody and big drama. And so he went into prison, and that's when he was first introduced to shooting heroin, was actually behind bars, which happens all the time. It's just not often talked about. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the drug culture in jail. And so after 2 years, when he got out of prison, I went back to him, and that's when my heroin addiction started. So we started with prescription pills, and I actually started my opioid addiction to Suboxone first.
Wow.
So he could take Suboxone because at that time this was 12 years ago. They didn't test for Suboxone on drug panels back in the day. So a lot of people just coming out of prison, their opioid tolerance might be a little bit lower. So they'd use Suboxone and it wouldn't come up. So that's where it started. And then it quickly escalated to getting shot up with heroin. And that just changed my life forever. I was extremely addicted to shooting drugs, like the aspect and the ritual of the needle. And then I found cocaine and heroin together. So speedballs was really my poison.
That's like, we have a lot in common, Sarah.
Were you a speedball junkie?
Yes.
Yep.
And Xanax, all three. That was kind of like
Me too. It's like the trio.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very dumb. You know
Yeah,
what's
I mean,
interesting? One of the things you said about the shooting up drugs in the prison, it's like definitely heard a lot of stories like that. But what's even gnarlier is the sharing of one needle for one unit and these like just crazy syringes that are homemade and are passed around 50, 60 dudes a day. And it's almost like you're guaranteed to contract something just from
when I
using
did.
it.
Yeah, and that's part of my story. I mean, talk about consequences of using. I had every single one of them. So I contracted hepatitis C I ended up marrying him from my ex, and he had got hepatitis C in jail, in prison. And so I quickly within, at first I tried to use my own needle, but I mean, once you're that high, I mean, your brain, you're literally irrational. And that's the thing that I try and explain to people, like, there's nothing rational about addiction. Your brain has changed on a fundamental level. So that went out the window. And yeah, I contracted hepatitis C. So that was part of my story.
It's very, very common. And, and the other thing that you mentioned, and we actually never approached it in a podcast, I'm glad you did, is the addiction to the ritual with the needle. Like I've seen many people where that's almost as much of the addiction as the actual drug.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you were an IV user too, I mean, again, when you're looking at the brain, it's dopamine and serotonin, especially if you're doing speedballs, which was really my poison. It sends like 1,000 times more of a rush to your brain when you use a needle versus when you snort or take a pill. That release of dopamine in your brain is just, it's something that you can't even explain the rush that it gives you. But I mean, I would find myself like, I would try and shoot anything up. Like if I didn't have access to heroin or cocaine, I mean, like crazy stuff at one point, like I thought I could shoot alcohol. I mean, like Xanax, Suboxone, anything I could shoot up. And by the end of my addiction, I was covered in track marks from my toes to my neck. And just, I couldn't go anywhere without people just like staring at me in horror of what I looked like at that point. It was just so insane.
Yeah, it definitely gets pretty insane, and one of the things I related to what you said with like knowing someone has hepatitis C, but getting high is just more important than the potential of contracting hepatitis C. And in my life, I shared a needle with somebody who had it 100%. And I was just like you said, tried for like 2-3 weeks to avoid sharing needles or coming into contact with them. And at one point, there was only one, and I was like, F it, doesn't matter. Luckily, I somehow never got it. I have no idea. Maybe she was like misdiagnosed or something like that. But I can relate to just the, nothing matters. You just getting high is what matters, and everything else can just be figured out later.
Yeah, I mean, that shows like the level of insanity that I would willingly get hepatitis to do drugs
forever.
Well, and actually, so that's part, I have a happy ending on all accounts. I am now 100% hepatitis free.
Congrats.
But I was when I was 4 years, and I got really into health. That's what I mean, like health became just like a staple in my recovery and my journey, like food and hot yoga. But I actually had, and like 22%, it's like 15 to 22%. Don't quote me on the actual statistics because I don't have them in front of me, but I had a spontaneous remission of my hepatitis.
Wow.
And
no medication. It just happened from clean living.
Yep. 100% from clean living and enough time, my body, it's a virus. I mean, and so, and again, young females within that first there's like a certain category where it is more common. But no, I mean, I just actually ironically had scans of my an ultrasound of my liver done because I have a new doctor, and people get really wigged out when I I give
say that. Oh, I had hepatitis, but I don't anymore. It's no big deal.
Oh God. And then I had hepatitis, I had a contracted gallbladder, I had superior mesonomic artery syndrome, just basically like your arteries collapse on. So she was like, we should probably scan your organs just to,
Let's
to
look
make
Your
back
whole
into that.
body, like top to bottom.
yeah, I mean, it's like, I was I mean, 12 years later, but so everything is still great. And I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm so blessed, like on all accounts, just to be sober. I mean, you and I, we don't live. People don't live through speedballs. A lot of
Right.
them, you know. I mean, it's just
True.
and Xanax. That combo is a death sentence, you know. And
Yeah,
then
it's a
on top
killer.
of it, to be totally healthy, you know, I'm lucky.
Well, I don't know if it's lucky, but you put in the work and you did
Yes.
all the things right, as far as like not just getting sober, you got healthy and you
Yeah.
put in all that work, because I
Yeah.
think that is a big part of why you were able to hit that spontaneous remission. If you
Yeah.
just gotten sober and kept smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and living that lifestyle, I don't know that that would have happened.
No, it probably wouldn't. But honestly, like, I am lucky in the sense of I had a mom who helped me. And
Yeah.
really, like, that's part of my story, is like I had a champion and a caregiver and a cheerleader, because I was so broken at first that, like, actually when I first did get sober, I remember, I mean, that early sobriety, I smoked a pack a day and ate Taco Bell and, you
There
know,
you
didn't
go.
have a car and was living in a sober living and was extremely unhealthy. And my mom's the one who actually found me, because I died. I mean, she found me and I went into a vegetable state coma. And I actually like had grand mal seizures and was hospitalized, and they thought that I was going to have brain damage for the rest of my life. And that's when they discovered the myriad of health issues I had, because I had every
How long, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how long were you dead for, do you think? How long before she found
when
you?
I say I died, I didn't legally die. But I mean, I was about to die. Like, I
Right.
had the defibrillator and they shot me up with adrenaline in the ambulance, but I was in like like a stroke like vegetable state coma for 3 days solid.
Wow.
And
From an overdose, I'm assuming.
yeah, from an
Yeah,
overdose.
gotcha. Gotcha.
And they thought I was going to have brain damage, and I was having the grand mal seizures, and so they stopped me from dying.
Jeez.
And
So intense.
I mean, it was horrible.
And horrible for your mom to find that. I mean, luckily she did, and she was able to jump to and do the right thing. But
Yeah.
I can only imagine, and I'm sure now you can as a parent as well, like what that
Horror.
was like. Yeah.
Horror. I mean, and my mom and I have like just the best bond. I mean, we're like two, you know, peas in a pod, and we've always been really close. And, you know, I'll never forget her sitting there, because I was completely conscious. That's the other weird thing. Like, I was 100% with it through all of it. I could not speak. All I could do is like move my eyes big. I mean, my hands were curled, my mouth was like this. But I just was watching my mom, and she just would not let go of me. And she just kept telling me, like, today is not the day you're going to die. Like, you are not going to die today. This is not how our story ends. And it carried me through. I mean, it makes me want to cry today. Like, and she did that every single day for like the first year of my recovery and sobriety. Every day. She was like, because I went to treatment for a year. Like, I was not
lucky.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I was not yet sober, and I'm so happy. I was, you know, coming out of medical detox and pissed and angry and wanted to die every day. I mean, I was so messed up. But through my mom, and then you're right, Andrew, through hard work and years of work, I then found that advocacy in myself and was able to really start to design the life that I wanted to live.
I imagine a big part of that too, besides just getting your body healthy, was detaching from that toxic relationship, which was just going to, you know, bring you back down time and time again.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why I was gone for, I mean, I never went home, but I was gone for a year. And again, my mom knew. I mean, she knew if I had just went to rehab and gone home, I would be dead.
Right.
I'd be dead.
Yeah. Well, I think that an important point we touched on in the very beginning, and you're right, we do see it all the time. It's a big prevention of people getting in, but we see, I think, one of the biggest causes of relapse is over, you know, an attachment to a significant other. every single time. It's like, that's what does people in. That's the one thing they want to numb out or can't control, or it just brings so many emotions that people don't know how to deal with those emotions. And so they want to numb it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you have to change everything. Like, fortunately and unfortunately, like, you have to change everything, you know? And so and I've seen maybe one person who had like a toxic relationship and they had a happy ending. And I say one because it's literally the only person I've seen have it work. So I don't want to give people false hope, but one time I've seen it work.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I could probably count the times on my hands that I've seen it be successful too. And I'm like, damn, there it goes against like the narrative I have of it not working. But one thing I wanted to say that I thought was a cool correlate, like to what you said, was like, I feel lucky to have not died. Like, I know I got sober because of like the hard work and kind of the same thing that you were saying. But I almost feel like I work harder because I got so lucky to not die. Like, I was just graced to keep somehow, right? Like what you said, people that do these types of drugs, you don't have a long life expectancy. No. You don't know 50-year-old speedballer peoples, you know? No. So it's like, I felt the same with you, where I was very lucky to get through that period of my life. And the reason I'm sober today and work so hard is because I don't know how the hell I'm still here.
Yeah, I totally I was thinking about that the other day, and I don't know you, but I would assume you're probably a slight overachiever as well. And there's almost that, like, I don't want to call it survivor's guilt, but there is. It's almost like, oh my God, I lived. Like, I better do something with this second chance and like go all the way. And it's that same propensity of like, I'm going to go all the way with shooting heroin, cocaine. But it's true. It's like using that, right? So then,
it's a
skill. You channel it. It's like, you have to channel the insanity and the oomph, whether it's good or bad somewhere. But I find that those of us who share that tend to be overachievers in sobriety, which was why I also am incredibly passionate about mental health for people in recovery as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's so important that we all then continue to take care of ourselves and our mental well-being.
Yeah. Well, I think the addiction leaves your mental health in a state of confusion, you know, or it's just like a mental emergency is what you're left with, you know? Yeah. So it's
it's not to interrupt, but like, addiction is actually like in the DSM-5 manual, like a mental illness, you know, I mean, like, it legitimately is a mental health disorder that we struggle for, you know. And then you talk about the chemicals, like, this is what I always, you know, especially when we're looking at designing programs or talking with families or youth, it can take 2 years for your brain to even start to like stabilize just from a chemical perspective. I mean, it's like, we've got to also understand that aspect of what we're dealing with from that mental health perspective.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, I think the self-love and the practicing of patience and acceptance of part of the process, because I think a lot of people get sober and they think, okay, cool, now I'm sober, like I should be achieving all these things. And it is a process, and it takes work, and it takes time, and it takes persistence. And a lot of people give up before they get to that point.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people also don't get the help that they need once they get sober too. You know, it's like drugs and alcohols. Usually we do drugs and alcohol to numb other issues, you know, or to compensate for like an actual mental health illness, which is different than a mental health condition, or the relationship issues, early childhood trauma. I mean, we're learning so much more. So again, I think once people get sober, like, that's a lot of the time when like the real work actually comes in, because you can get people off drugs and alcohol. Like, that's hard, but it's actually the easier part than helping people maintain sobriety and recovery.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely always kind of say abstinence is just the first step to seeing what you need to fix, what's really there, you know, kind of like what you were saying. And yeah, I think, you know, a lot of people, maybe they don't get the right help, but I also feel like people don't really know, everyone's different, You know, I that's one thing that I know that's true from being a counselor for the last 7 years. It's like everybody's different, you know, and it's like some people just don't know how to give the best advice for every person. And I think a lot of treatment and counselors and people in the field and people in the rooms, they think like they just project what works for them. They just project what they're right. Like it'd just be like if I got a microphone and said, "This is how you get sober," and it's just my life story. And that's not going to work for everybody. And so I think that's like a big issue I see.
100,000%. And I think like talk about, because I'm obviously passionate about systems. We design entire systems off of a one idea approach, you know, and
one model,
yeah, you know, and then, you know, it's like, it's 100% correct. I mean, I got sober in the rooms. I always say that, but I also am no longer in the rooms. I also say that, you know what I mean? I also became an international drug treatment researcher. And I think that there are some benefits and there are some cons, and that's in all things. But you know, I love hearing that because it's so true. It's like, just because, you know, I did these certain things does not mean that the person who had, you know, a very abusive childhood, who was raped, you know, that's going to work for her. You know, I mean, she has a whole different set of circumstances than maybe I did.
Yeah, I think that's partly why our program is so successful, because so much of it is done in a curriculum form where it just poses different questions, scenarios, digs deep, where the person is finding their own answers, as opposed to somebody telling them what they think their problem is, or your problem's like my problem, I get you. It means so much more, and it's such a more lasting thing when the person can find it within themselves, because like Dallas is saying, every single person is different. My why is not your why, is not his why. And this allows people to really explore what their why is and then be positive over that.
And then it empowers them, you know. I mean, that's exactly right. It like gives them some sense of agency over their life, because ultimately choices matter, as we all know. And if we can teach people how to make better choices for their circumstances, then yeah, it's 100%. No, I love that. We've done a lot of the work that we've been focusing on, and I've looked at, is a lot of trauma. Like that's really where, especially with youth in the population, we serve high Medicaid clients, you know, the low income, intergenerational poverty, abuse. And so my interest over this last couple of years with a lot of the work that I've done has really started to look at like, how do we create trauma focused and informed programs to also start to address that, which is positive and negative, because then you also know you open up people's trauma and you start doing like trauma intensive work, and that has its pros.
That has its own list of things.
Yeah, and I imagine like one of the most difficult parts is allowing them to experience and go through the trauma, but not be a victim of it, so that they can actually be positive over their future, as opposed to, you know, carrying this thing around with them and saying, oh, I can't be responsible for that because look at this trauma that I went through. I can't do that because of this trauma. So it's like also a very fine line of allowing them to address their trauma, but then not be victimized by it, or
and process it. And, you know, the emotions and behaviors that associate with trauma, which is like acting out, you know, I mean, it's, especially when you look at the adolescent population, it's a lot of feelings, a lot of, I mean, adults too,
a lot of hormones.
You amplify it, and it, oh yeah. So,
I remember those days back in our early days. We used to bring juveniles in, and it was, I mean, it was very rewarding, but it was also, it's a unique population, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've worked with adults and juveniles. Adults are a lot easier. I mean, until they act like kids, and then it's not, but
but you can still talk to them like as an adult, like kids. I don't want to say you have to have kid gloves, but you've got to like try to meet them where they're at, which is harder when you're an adult.
I know.
Well, it's hard to meet irrationality. Like it's just a hard thing to manage or be with, because it's just random. It doesn't make sense, at least to us. And it's just a difficult spot to be in. Right, when you say,
which is like, no, go ahead, keep going. I'm just saying, which is a whole, like it's irrational.
yeah, it's like, what do you do with irrationality?
Right.
You know, like
There's no reasoning with it.
yeah.
No.
So it's like, okay, right on. What else? You know?
Exactly. It's so
So
true.
Sarah, I was gonna ask, how did you get into the like treatment research? And is that what you said? It was like treatment research
Yeah.
or what? So
Yeah.
what were you researching? How did you get into that? What does that look like now?
Well, so I ended up going back to school. That's like part of my recovery story. Like I said, I worked
There we
in
go.
film. So I worked in film and I got sober in LA, and I realized really quickly, like, there's no way I can be in that scene. Like I was not going to make it. And I wasn't even that, like, my addiction, it's like stages of addiction. And I've always been, it's like genetically I am predisposed, and I have that like intensity to use whatever it is, good or bad. So I was like a binger, especially with alcohol and pills when I worked in film, but I just knew too much of what entails in that world. And so really after that, like year or 2 years of my first early recovery, once I literally felt sane again, like it took me, I remember talking to my mom for a good almost 2 years saying like, I feel better, but am I ever going to feel normal? Like, am I ever going to feel normal? I'll never forget that feeling. So once I started to feel more normal and like my brain literally started to even itself out, and going through all the different treatments that I went through, we could have an entire
other series of podcasts covering those.
Yeah. So I was so horrified by a lot of what I did see. And then I was also so interested in the brain, really. So when I went back to school, I was just like taking just regular classes at first. And then I met a professor who just like revolutionized and changed my life. And he was the dean of an international political science school. And that's when I entered into political science, and it's a soft science, but what it allowed me to do was like tailor my research and my education to look at the larger system that I had been a part of, and to study it more from that constructivist, like bigger view perspective. And so what my thesis and my research really centered on was the international opioid drug treatment system and the socioeconomic development behind that. So really looking at like, how do societies create institutions and programs? How's it funded? What are the outcomes? And I mean, I've studied everything from like the geopolitical war in Afghanistan and Pakistan on opioids, to harm reductions in the Netherlands, to decriminalization in Portugal, to the United States politics and evolution and war on drugs. So I really became like a hardcore researcher.
That's amazing. And one thing you said when we did our YouTube special together, but I think it's important for people to understand, following the fentanyl. I'm just sort of going to shift gears, because a lot of people are like, how did it get here? Why is it here? What's this new drug? And you specifically lay it out in terms that I 100% believe as well.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at fentanyl, right, it's in the class of opioids, and fentanyl was actually created in the early 1960s to be the most powerful opioid on the planet. It was designed with that philosophy. And it was during that era when pain management was first kind of developing from like a pharmaceutical and pharmacological perspective for cancer patients, particularly, and for people with really intense pain. And then it was like, we all have heard the story of OxyContin at this point. It's like fentanyl's its bigger, scarier cousin that's just kind of been like waiting in the background, because it was originally formulated as a patch or as lollipops. I mean, if you were in the drug scene, every once in a while, like back in the day when I did, you could get like a fentanyl lollipop or a patch.
Right. Well, it was also utilized for like operations or surgeries, right? It was knock you out or
massive surgery, cancer, pain management, and so it wasn't really though pushed the way OxyContin was at first. But what has happened now, especially with the rise, it's like everything affects everything. So the rise in the manufacturers and the shutdown of OxyContin, especially the international scene in China, and Afghanistan and the Mexican cartels have figured out that they can actually start manufacturing fentanyl. And so that is where the majority of the United States fentanyl is coming from, is an international drug trade that has taken over, that's almost mimicking like the OxyContin. It's just not like a pharmaceutical company one behind it, but it's that, you know, it's the market. It's like picking up the supply and demand. And
Right.
They're
so,
just filling the shoes.
And it's
And
100% synthetic. So we're not relying on them like, you know, mining these poppy fields.
overseeing
They're
it.
just,
Yes, and that's exactly right. What I brought is, so, you know, even with like pharmaceutical companies own poppy fields all over the world. Like they
Right.
have, especially in Turkey and in Australia and Tasmania, but fentanyl is 100% synthetic. We can make it in, it's like meth. It's like meth.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
make it in your car.
You can cook it.
Yeah, you can make it. And so it's an unlimited supply and it's like unlimited revenue. And now they're also utilizing social media. And that's one of like the scariest trends, is the ease of which kids and people can get their hands on fentanyl. And they
Mhm.
literally can get it on TikTok and Snapchat, and it's sent from China. The Mexican cartel is coming in, and even like Afghanistan, the Taliban, which controlled 90% of the world's opium and was really one of the drivers behind the heroin crisis, they are now starting to manufacture fentanyl as one of the driving revenue sources. So, you know, and the other thing that we talked about, which a lot of people need to be really careful, and this is, I mean, I said a comment that was like shocking, but I'm going to say it again. It's like, know where you get your drugs if you're doing them, because people, if you're buying random drugs, even if it's like cocaine or it's weed, people are still, yeah, they're lacing it with fentanyl, and then you have tons of kids and people dying. I mean, right now, fentanyl, not even just like all classes of opioids, but fentanyl is the leading cause of death in the United States for 18 to 45-year-olds.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
it's shocking.
They just posted some on the news saying it's killed more, which is nice to see it get some coverage like that.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of coverage, but it's like, yeah, man, fentanyl is killing more people than COVID, than cancer, than suicide. Like all of those, the leading cause. Like, but they have to put it into like categories that normal people understand. More than suicides, more than cancer, more than COVID. Every year.
Right. So why aren't we talking about it more? Come on, because it's $1 billion industry.
Yeah, it's $1 billion industry. And it's also like the United States not even controlling the $1 billion industry. You know, I mean, this is really, it's like they are in some levels, but also like the international market of it. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think we have not put enough attention into a systematic, actual way to treat addiction and policy. And we start policies and then we don't have the infrastructure to actually carry them out how they are done. And I'm watching that in Washington State. I mean, we could get into so many different topics, but like Portugal decriminalized drugs, right? In 2000, they had a heroin addiction, 1% of their entire population, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is astronomical, like one of the worst. And decriminalization was extremely successful, but it's because they had massive infrastructure and a lot of treatment centers. And that, like, literally, if you get arrested for drugs, you have like a case manager, a psychologist, a lawyer, and you go off to treatment, and they do a whole combination. They a lot of harm.
That's awesome.
I know, it's great, but then we have we're like decriminalizing drugs now, starting in some states like Oregon and Washington, which in theory, I thought I was going to be really excited about. But in practice, what I'm actually seeing is now we don't have that support system to go with it. And so what we're going to happen is have a lot more crime, a lot more dead people, because we don't have really any, I mean, we don't have safe needle time. Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of harm reduction, which again, it's like, but from a life-saving perspective, right? And when with massive policy, and then we don't fund treatment centers, and we have really crappy reimbursement rates and short coverage, even if you do have commercial payers, like we don't have the system to support a lot of this.
A lot of change.
100%. In fact, it just keeps getting worse and worse with the insurance companies and
it's-
trying to drop levels of care. And it's like, oh, you've been sober 2 days. You can go to outpatient, get on your Suboxone, you're fine. It's crazy.
Yeah, insurance, if we want to do, like, if we want to like end the war on drugs, like we need to start a war on insurance in this country.
Right.
Because like that really is where we need to make change and have a lot of political action is the insurance companies.
Well, I think it's the biggest barrier. It's like all signs point to insurance type of thing. It just always leads its way back into money, and insurance has all the money, and they're the ones
they don't wanna
paying
pay
for
you.
the services and
Right.
care.
Well, and they're in bed with the pharmaceutical company. So they're always going to be like, you don't need treatment. You just need to be on this medication. See your fix.
And with fentanyl, you know, again, I've done a lot of research, like in some cases with fentanyl, like harm reduction is good, but it's never, and I'm going to say this, like there's not a lot of studies that show harm reduction on its own, right? Like just methadone or just Suboxone, like it's always better if somebody has a therapeutic component with that type of treatment. You know, it's like, again, and I had to get over, I had some biases, like Suboxone's what introduced me to heroin. Like, so I therefore was like at first anti-Suboxone, and I can own that. And being just in the 12-step, now after doing some research and working with addiction medicine doctors, like I can see the benefit, but I'm still going to always like be a supporter of that whole person approach to make sure that you're also meeting the psychological and other elements that go along with it for success.
Well, 100%, or else they're just going to end up on such high amounts of Suboxone because they haven't done anything to handle their addiction. They're just switching it to a pill. And then they like come to us and we're like, I don't even know if we can get this person off of this in 60 days. They're at such a high dose. It's crazy.
It takes 6 weeks. I doubt, I mean, I don't know if you guys actually do medical detox for Suboxone. Yeah. I mean, that's good to know actually, because I've had people who, you know, because I know there's some places in Florida. So you actually do like full Suboxone medical detox?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going that they also do the program. It's not just a medical detox. Like the program is mandatory.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, methadone too, but I think it's kind of more of a hit or miss. It's like more of a let's have a conversation, because that could take
a long time. And both of them, they're
But Suboxone's far more prevalent. You know, people coming in at 24 milligrams of Suboxone, you're like, dude.
Yeah. And then, you know, we're also in California, so there's laws about, you know, if they want to be on it, you got to let them be on it. And,
the thing that makes me worried with that is like the lack of long-term studies too, right? It's like a lot of the studies were short-term. Like I think Suboxone, when used as like what it was actually designed for, is great. Like a short-term detox agent that like makes it so you don't keyword feel, unless you're on Xanax like us or heavy alcohol like
and Coke.
Like then in medical detox. But opioids, you're not going to die unless it's methadone. Then you are going to die if you get detoxed off of it. Like methadone does kill you. But I think Suboxone as a short-term detox to get from point A to point B, but we have now, it's like being prescribed for years. I just don't, it'll be interesting. And I don't like to use the word interesting, but it's like health outcomes and what it does to the brain for such prolonged uses. Have you guys looked at a lot of the stuff that's happening with like ibogaine and some of the other clinical research with psychedelics?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm familiar, but I could never have said I've researched it probably like you have or something like that.
Yeah.
Familiar though, yes.
It's interesting what is starting to happen, because at the same time, and I know we're supposed to be talking about fentanyl, but I just will say that.
Oh no, we can talk about everything.
Gone on, but right in 2001 when Suboxone was really starting to go through like FDA approval, ibogaine was also, and there's a lot of like neuroscientists, but ibogaine blocks opioid receptors in the brain. It's like a very powerful hallucinogenic, but it literally stops like detox the moment you take it. Now,
and then you
people
trip out.
hard. Like,
yeah, and yeah.
okay. Like, yeah. And I will tell you, I have seen one of the craziest things I've done is and I've not done anything with the footage. And one day when I actually have time, I will, but like I did a documentary of filming someone's like underground journey.
Oh
wow.
man,
It's
where'd
the
you go?
desperate-
Canada or Mexico?
No, it was a dealer in Portland, and you got okay. And okay.
Oh shit. Okay.
No, it ended up. So again, I just filmed it. I did not participate. I had releases, but it was interesting because this individual's journey, he had been a heroin addict, an opioid addict for 15 years and had literally done absolutely everything. And like and had tried to hang himself like 15 times, was at his Suboxone, methadone, 12-step, which he had always had the most success in like an abstinence space, but just couldn't maintain it. He went on this like desperate journey to get ibogaine, and he ended up finding it and taking it, and it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And I would never recommend to do this ever, like unsupervised. It's extremely dangerous, but it was interesting to see that the detox symptoms stopped immediately.
Really?
And then
Wow.
there was the heavy hallucinogenics, but like some of the insights, and then afterwards he's been sober and has a baby, and it's been 5 years now.
Wow.
And it like helped give some like spiritual insights, but the science behind it is interesting. And so it's back now. Suboxone kind of got its foothold in the FDA process as a pharmaceutical because it's a lot easier to manufacture and make and produce than ibogaine was, but they were both trying to go through the stage 3 trials around the same time, and now it's kind of coming back. So it'll be interesting to see like where some of this goes in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and we've even done episodes on it. It's becoming very common now for people to be either microdosing or utilizing ayahuasca or just different methods to sort of reach that spiritual breakthrough that they're searching for or looking for. But, you know, like with any drug, it can become a slippery slope, you know, where that now you're living for that.
I'm not going to do it. Like, you know, after this much of sobriety, what interests me in some of those things is again, it's like the neuroscience of like, what does it actually do? So much of what we do, we think is one thing, but ends up being like really the neurology of our brains, right? It's like the dopamine that we chase. It's like exercise. That's one of the best, like, I know you talk about dopamine and a brain enhancer. It's like, no wonder a lot of us do go towards fitness. And it's the same thing with chasing that spiritual high. And I am a spiritual person, but I also believe in science and like that neuroscience. I'm excited for the field to go more in the brain and the actual chemical imbalances and start to really look at some of that. And I think we'll see more breakthroughs like in the next 10 years.
And I would love to see, you know, like true mindfulness, you know, people like getting calm and creating that space and having scientific studies on that, because, you know, we see that in practice all the time and how beneficial it is.
They're starting. So like actually some medical schools, like even in Washington State, one of the things I've been a part of is the Medicaid transformation, but it's integrating physical, behavioral, and substance use disorder. But there are like WSU, and there are a lot of medical schools and nursing schools that are studying like the actual benefits of mindfulness, and they're redoing a lot of their curriculum. Like they're actually starting to look at like the biopsychosocial and spiritual component and utilizing like yoga, CrossFit, hyperbaric chambers they've done research for. And so it's like now you actually have to show from a Medicaid perspective that you are meeting physical as well as mental health, and relaxation is like becoming more of a norm, which is great to see.
Super great to see and hear, because that gives me hope that we're not leaning so heavy on the just take this pill and feel better, that there is a holistic approach that's being given validity to as well.
And being paid out for, which is like, you know, it's a total bummer that the insurance company decides what treatment is, you know, because that's what they pay for. So in terms, whatever they're willing to pay for is what these people have to try and meet.
Right.
You know,
and then you have to try and run as a facility. right?
Right.
From like how to actually use the payment to make your
Yeah.
facility run. I mean, there's so many different challenges.
Yeah, and we definitely get paid less than a lot of others because
Yeah.
we're not just medicating people. They're like, if you
Yeah.
just give them some pills, you could bill for that. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not really what we're trying to do. And obviously, so we're not the most profitable based on just those reasons. But
you
know.
guys, do you track your outcomes?
Yes.
Yeah, then you should go back and negotiate and show them your
Yes.
outcomes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
we've definitely done that. We'll keep trying to do that,
Yeah.
but go try to talk
I
to,
know.
Blue Cross. Good luck. I mean,
I'm about to.
I know. Well,
I'll
and we
let you
tried
know
to
how
prove,
it
like,
goes.
look at, here's our recidivism rate. Here's how little we've taxed the system after they graduate. We've definitely put together those reports to sort of at least get a higher payer, contract for the next year,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh God, it's a whole. Yeah, and then
Yes.
I
It's the whole
know.
thing, right? It's like,
I
why
know.
would you not care about those numbers?
Yeah, they don't. Well, and the length of stay. That's the other. I mean, that
Right.
is like you guys. One of you said it. It's like 2 days in. Like,
Yep.
in what world? Like, we authorize payment for people who break their legs and can go for rehabilitation for 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and we're gonna authorize 2 days for someone who's just tried to kill
rewire
themselves.
their brain.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other part of that, besides them dropping levels of care so quickly and us having to like fight how bad they're doing so that they'll pay, is if someone, let's say they're coming straight out of jail and they're like, I am afraid to use, I need a program, jail didn't do anything for me. If they have insurance, we're like, sorry, you've been sober 30 days. We can't, insurance won't pay for you to be here. So it's like you literally, the person has to be using in order for insurance to say, okay, fine, we'll pay for it. They can't do it as a proactive, like preventative measure. It's got to be like, you've got to be really bad before we'll even consider it.
Yeah, we're seeing one of the things that we have been facing, and there's like a lot of legislation, but it's like, again, is like the homelessness too. So there's a lot of studies that are starting to come out that show like youth exiting systems of care become homeless and like at a quicker rate in that post 12 months. Well, it's like, yeah, because they go back to homes that are incredibly toxic, but insurance companies does not see homelessness as a medical necessity. And then there's no housing programs. That's the other thing. I mean, I know we have, but I'm a big proponent of sober livings, but like regulated sober livings.
Right.
And
Real ones, yeah.
Oh yeah, because again, we could have a whole,
not just your buddies sober living,
which happens all the time.
Yeah.
If we can also, anybody
Put
who's
some
got
attention on that, yeah.
a year sober opens up houses, and it's like a horror story of what's happening in unregulated sober housing in this country. It's
well, there is no regulation, really.
I know.
There's no rules. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's your house and people pay you to live there and you make up your own rules. And
I know, which is
it's a great business model. People relapse, you keep the money and you put somebody else in.
If we could get some like payment to actually look at long-term recovery and have like structured programs that aren't run by Johnny, who has a year sober and is then doing
some real transitional housing and job placement and job skills training, like that would be amazing. And you're right, if we could get insurance to pay for that, there would be a lot more success in long-term sobriety for sure.
Totally. Yeah, and then
even the government, or I'm sorry, maybe not the government, but even like the halfway houses that like people coming out of jails and prisons are sent to, or even those are even screwed up. There's 40 people in a freaking
room.
Tiny room, and it's nuts to hear about. Like the transitional living piece is like really, the ball is like really being dropped.
Huge. Yeah. I know. I'm like, talk about obsession. It's one of my obsessions right now
and it's such a hard fix, right?
Yeah.
So you're actually going to the insurance companies, or you're going to the state? What are you doing and how are you doing it?
So here
comes the positive.
I'm trying to work on the healthcare authority and who oversees, has like Washington's different. Everybody's different, right? And so again, we work more with Medicaid, but I feel like if we can get the healthcare authority, because Medicaid in Washington, they are private and part government funded. So they get both.
Right.
And so the healthcare authority, though, oversees the Medicaid part funds. And so we're trying to look at showing how, okay, nobody wants kids to be homeless, right? And young adults, but we have no housing. So there's different initiatives and laws going on right now, because I do a lot of like political advocating. And so trying to get the state to pay and Commerce to pay for funds for housing. And we're really close. I'm actually about to roll out a program that is the first of its kind in Washington state that does have a transitional living component to it. And so I've just been in a lot of negotiations and talks with different MCO payouts that could be integrated into it. And I've made some really good progress. The next step is looking at some of the commercial payers. So I think this program, it's a pilot program. I have the funding for 3 years, but again, if I can show the outcomes and the measurements, I think it will be kind of that ticket to the larger vision that I've had, which is actual transitional living. And especially for the youth and then the young adult age for that transitional, and embedding school and vocational training into it. And then, I mean, really, it's like, I think part of the way we could fund it is PHPs too, from the private insurance side. If they don't want to do full like case agreements on single day, it's like having more intensive outpatient as part of that payment structure. And then in Washington state, there's a big movement on the peer support programs. And so you can actually bill for peer support now. And like people actually get certified through the state, and you can bill with them through commercial plans too. So that's where, like, from a staffing ratio, if we could have it run through peer support specialists, and then you have PHP and you get the state and Medicaid funds, I think I could actually pull it off. So I'm starting with this first pilot program, but it's just a nightmare with COVID and staffing and the multitude of outbreaks we've had. You know, I mean, it's just the day-to-day operations, but we're working through
it. Yeah, just to throw a few more wrenches into everything. Let's throw COVID in there on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what I can say is it's super like uplifting. It's a bright spot to hear that people are out there in the world doing things that you're doing, you know, especially being in the treatment setting and just bumping into these issues left and right. And I know, you know, we're not the only ones experiencing these things. So it's just like a very uplifting feeling to know there's people out there fighting for like real change, you know, from like a systemic level. So yeah, kudos to you, Sarah. That's super awesome. You're doing those things.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way about you. I mean, I looked at before I even agreed, you know, at what your program was, like what your services are. And I love the philosophy, and it just looks awesome. And actually caring, right? And like creating, I mean, the fact that I know your payments are less, but that you're still going to provide and keep the integrity to what you guys find to be the best outcomes. Like, I think that's the key for all of us, because it's so easy to give in when you're in a system. It's just like one fight after the other, but maintaining that integrity is huge.
Yeah, well, thank you for acknowledging that, because it's our biggest, you know, problem with investors or otherwise, because, you know, they're like, okay, insurance quit paying, kick them out. Oh, you only need like 2 staff to do that. You don't need your 20 staff to handle that. And so, you know, it affects the levels of care and the amount of care that you can give people and how they're going to do it. And it's vital to keep your integrity, you know, not sell your soul to appease insurance companies and agencies. And that's really hard to do, because they're like holding your survival over their head.
And that's how you have to run. It's like ultimately a business. I mean, you have to make the income to provide the services and to provide good quality services. Yeah, we're part of what I also do is raise like copious amounts of money, because we are a nonprofit. And so we do have that element, which does help bring in that other financial service. Because I mean, without that, we wouldn't be able to do any of the more substance stuff that we do. So that has been a big part of it.
That's awesome. Is this your nonprofit? Do you run this or?
No, I mean, I do all of the funding. It's the company's nonprofit, but I mean, it is something. So it's like that's how I've been able to do some like more of our innovative programming. So I created something called the Life Enrichment program like 4 or 5 years ago, which is nobody will pay for these services. And it's probably a lot of what you guys are providing, but we
Right.
provide like equine therapy, boxing, yoga, trauma-informed meditation, Broadway. I mean, literally, like we partner with 50 different local community agencies and offerings, and that's now become like a robust recreation. It's 100% donation based and grant based because the payers won't pay. But now, I mean, now I have, the state is actually starting to look at outcomes and having conversations about possibly paying for some of these services. So that's where, I mean, there's always a solution. I feel like that's my job. Like, honestly, my job is like fixing problems and finding the money
Yeah.
to fix the problems, but there's a solution to every issue.
Dang, that makes you incredibly valuable on both fronts because neither of those are easy at all. So that's amazing that you're out there doing that. I'm very appreciative of that for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. My brain is just reeling and spinning. I'm just, it's like, I think like the people that work at Elevate, all my friends in treatment, like we always talk about these things and they always just kind of feel so vast and large to solve.
It's just understand how it's, and that's why, like, even with Follow the Poppy, that's why I'm extremely intentional. So even like my vision with Follow the Poppy, like I always want to do system level work, which is why I haven't given it as much attention because I'm really busy. On top of having a child. But if you can figure out the system, and this is what I do, right? Then you figure out avenues to work within it to change it. But it's like, and that's how I do it. I take a very like system level approach. And so that's kind of my plan for Follow the Poppy too, is to do some of that more system level, do some consulting, do some programmatic funding, because it exists. It's amazing what I've been able to see happen over the last couple of years. So there's just lots of ideas and lots of avenues. And like, even just what you guys are doing, like it's different, which is hard, but it's also good.
I know. Yeah. Right. It's good and hard.
Yeah.
But someone's got to do it, because if we're
do it.
not doing it, who is? And then, everything is the same. And then people don't want help because all the help is the same. All the help is exactly, you're going to be approved this many days and you're going to go to meetings, you're going to be put on this medication. And there's where people lose hope for help because that's all they think is out there.
Well, when they've done it 7 times,
not,
you know what I mean? I mean, the recidivism rate is like, and then that's part of the process, like that's normal, but it's also like, okay, if you've done something 7 times, let's look at what's not working, right? Like what needs to change.
Right. It's like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, and you're expecting somehow it's going to have a different result.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we hope that's the case, especially with people trying to get sober, but at the same time, you can see where they give up because they think, I've tried this 7 times. It's not obviously working. So
yeah, I mean, people lose hope. That's one of the things I hear over and over again. I think that's like part of our job. It's like, especially those of us who have, but it's keeping hope alive. It's like, whether that's individual or the system, like we have to keep the hope alive to change it. Otherwise it does become bleak and it does become like the day to day and things don't happen.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I mean, I think like my ultimate vision, not like personally, but what I would love to see is that, there is some sort of like agency that like knows all the treatment centers and what they specialize and what their success rate is and like where their value points are at, and they just kind of collect people and send them to like the most perfect match. Kind of like if I was to call my doctor and say, hey, I need a heart doctor, they would know 8 heart doctors in the area that kick ass and work on hearts successfully, and then put people in those places.
Oh, you're right. And honestly, we need a behavioral health association because it's like hospitals, long-term care. How do you think they have the money? They have like physical health associations, and they lobby and they set policy and they dictate their payment. I mean, what hospitals are paid versus providing health versus what we're all paid. the disparity is huge, but they're vocal. And I feel like that is something that as a system, we need more of, is that like united front of an association to really make sure that systematic change happens. But I worked on a project actually kind of similar to what you were saying, with one of our local community accountable health. It's a little bit complicated, but anyways, they had funds. And so we created something called Capacity Connect, and it was local, but I had that same vision that you were saying. This was for providers, especially with COVID, to be able to have a database of any organization that's locally that has beds opening, and to know like what their services are and what insurance they take. And so we ran different test groups, but I kept saying like, we're using this for the wrong user. Like it really does need to be for that consumer. Like it 100% needs to be for somebody. Cause also like how, I mean, and you guys, how many people, a lot of the people seeking help are like the parents or the loved ones, and they don't know a lot, and they get taken advantage of, or they just blindly go with the first place that might not be great, you know. And so I just think there needs to be a lot more services in that area.
Oh, 100%.
It shouldn't be a huge mystery, you know. It shouldn't be like every person should know, like, hey, there's this treatment center in Watsonville called Elevate Addiction Services, and 50% of people that go there stay sober.
Yep.
Like everyone should know that.
Yep.
You know, like people should know that, but no one does, you know. It's like, and that's for everybody too. And Southern California, Florida, and Washington, like everyone should know their local treatment center that kicks ass and is like actually helping people. You know, it shouldn't be like, where's McDonald's? Everyone knows where McDonald's is. Where's the closest McDonald's?
And there should be funding.
There should be funding.
That would be nice too.
But you know, if you Google, I think drug rehab is in the top 10 highest paid per click on Google. So like if you don't have this tremendous budget as a rehab to compete with like the big places like Acadia and stuff like that, you will never even be seen. Like Dallas is saying, you'll never even be seen because you just disappear.
You can't even begin to advertise. Do you guys even know that process?
Oh yeah, the whole yes.
Oh,
we go through legit script every single year.
Yeah. I mean, even just getting, but see, okay, so as a nonprofit, there's ad budgets.
Right.
Just anyways.
But again, if your budget isn't in the range of 100 grand a week, you're never going to be seen on the first 2 pages, no matter how big your ads
have the money to do that. And that's exactly right.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. You know, the more we talk, you see how much is stacked against us. It's like, well, we got the insurance companies, we got the drug companies, we got the Google, like
Mexican cartel.
Like, prevent us from helping people.
The Taliban. No, you guys are doing great. You're doing phenomenal.
Mic down.
I got excited. Oh, sorry.
I mean, you're still here. You're providing. I wouldn't have come on your podcast, like truthfully. Like I really don't like something.
Most treatment centers, yeah.
And I read, you know, it's not even I don't like them. I just think people get too stuck in the day to day. And I like that you guys still have that hope and are trying to do things different and have that integrity behind what you're doing. You know, I mean, I think that is the biggest piece. And it's like aligned on a personal belief with like how I also got sober and am doing the things I'm doing today. It's like very similar to what you guys are teaching people to do.
Absolutely.
So that's why I was interested in coming on and talking with you guys.
Well, we're really glad you have, because we do have a lot in common, and you have so much wealth of information, statistically and otherwise, that I think is extremely beneficial just for your average person to know, so they know what's going on out there. And obviously mainstream media is not going to talk about this stuff very much. It's not like the hottest thing out there, and there's no benefit for them to even talk about it. So I'm really glad you're here to talk about it.
Yeah. And you just have to be an advocate, either for yourself or for your loved ones. And a lot of the time, I think it's being an advocate for your loved ones, you know, and that's where I think education is so important, because people don't know.
Yeah, no, that's super true. And I think, you know, as Elevate and probably a lot of what you're doing too, is like I think steering away from Google and starting to use a lot more of like YouTube and social media to like highlight, where we can like speak freely and share freely and all that stuff is like a huge thing for treatment centers and getting the word out and getting the buzz out, and just like documenting services, to like reach people in a far cheaper route, So I really like the podcast avenue and the YouTube avenue and all that stuff to kind of just put it out there for free, and hopefully it finds people,
Yeah, I think that is the way. I think that's exactly right. I think that is part of a survival tactic. And it's true, like you get to control the narrative and have it come off exactly how you want. That's why even, I'm like slowly with Follow the Poppy, because I need it to be intentional. Like I haven't even, it's not even long, I mean, it's like in the pre stages, but that's how I'm going to utilize it too. And bringing people back to the website, which is still being developed and worked on for resources, and being able to control your own narrative. I think that is the way. And not paying because honestly, it's like, if we took that money that people pay on advertising and put it towards like funding people's treatment to actually stay longer.
Hello.
Yeah. It would solve all the problems.
Or paying to like be able to have like, mental health therapists that are trained in EMDR. I mean, there's so many other places that I think we could use those funds to actually help people.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think this is where it starts. It's sort of a grassroots movement where, we can just keep trying to organically reach more people and get more people on board and really change the narrative of what's happening in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people need it. And I mean, it's just going to keep getting worse. I mean, it's just that the projections that I'm hearing from like a mental health perspective it's just horrifying. I've worked with and sit on committees with like disaster response psychologists, and they do briefings. And I remember when it was Delta, they were like, if there's another, it was still Alpha or whatever it was, and then Delta, they were saying if there's a second variant, it's like an 18-month reconstruction period from each variant. And that like collectively there's studies with disasters like this, which there's never been a longer disaster in our time frame, but like people's cortisol, their stress hormones, more people are turning to alcohol and to drugs. I mean, and we're seeing it, right? We're seeing had more people die ever recorded in the history of the United States. Over 100,000 people died from drugs.
Yep.
And that's just from drugs. That's not even counting alcohol or
suicide.
Or suicide. Yeah. So, your guys' services, like everybody needs to do everything we can to help people right now, because it's just going to get worse.
Yep. Agreed. And we're seeing it, even just on the people coming in, they're worse than the people that were coming in a couple of years ago. Mentally, it's a struggle.
Yeah, no, the acuity is like a whole different, we're seeing it too. And our staff. I mean, I think that's the other thing, like the burnout, like just the burnout is just huge right now. Just individual, just the day-to-day grind.
Yeah, the ability to cope, the capacity to deal with normal.
Even as a healthy, I mean, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
You also have a baby, so you kind of have a little excuse there.
I'm like, I'm exhausted on so many fronts.
Yeah, that's a different level. That's a totally excusable. Even 10 years ago would have been acceptable.
Telling me he's gonna sleep through the night, and he's 8 months, and this has yet to happen. So.
Oh man.
We will see.
So 8 months of not sleeping through the night for yourself is included with that?
Oh, like multiple times a night he wakes up.
Damn.
Not one night.
Damn.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I've met my match in my
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And they have a good way of doing that. That karma just comes like right on back.
I just was like, oh no. I mean, it's so cute, but I'm like, okay, yep, I've met my match. Like we're gonna just go head to head on this sleep thing, dude.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's amazing. That's so cool. Well, congrats on the baby. Congrats on everything you're doing. That's so awesome. What a huge win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I worked hard, but I am one of the lucky ones. Like I'm forever grateful.
Yeah.
So-
Well, even just that viewpoint, right? It releases its own, feel good hormones, just expressing and having gratitude. I think, it's amazing. And the more we
Yeah.
can all do that, the better, again, the world will be, instead of being bitter and upset about everything that's
Yeah.
going on, is finding that gratitude.
That's like on my new year. I don't always do resolutions, but like changes, right? New habits. My husband actually for Christmas bought me a gratitude journal. And I was like,
Nice.
okay, well, this is a subconscious sign, obviously.
Yeah.
or overtly,
Yeah, this was like and it is a good reminder because I mean it is like one of the most powerful things. It's like the most simple and profound and powerful thing. So I'm going to write in the gratitude journal for my own sanity. And keep activating that part of the brain because it is like you get tired.
You too.
That's funny you said that because I'm usually not a New Year's resolution type of guy, but a couple days ago, I'm like, dude, this fucking year I am making some goals. This year has been ridiculous. The last two.
I feel, I really
Something's got to budge.
Yeah, I like the goal. I like framing it in that too, like tangible goals, because then it's like you can meet those. Yeah, I have a couple. Right. I do too. I have some big life goals this year.
Awesome.
There we go. Well, hey, cheers to that. Let's go get them,
Yeah.
I know. You guys too.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for coming on. Where can our listeners find you? What would be the best way to reach you?
The best way is followthepoppy.com. That's the website, or on Instagram, Follow the Poppy. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. Again, I have not been very active, but if you want to follow the journey, those are going to be the avenues to start with.
Awesome. And are you going to slip or do your film in here? Is that going to be part of this?
Eventually, yeah. That's one of the goals. Not this year, but that's why it's like it really is an overarching platform to support people who have been affected by opioids, and so it will take a couple of different avenues. And that's one of the goals, is to really actually get it off the ground in the new year.
There you go. Well, let us know if there's any way we can support you in that. I think, we definitely have our experience with the opioids and treatment and people and life and everything out here in California. So let us know if there's anything we can do to kind of help you with that.
Absolutely. No, and I want to stay in contact with you guys too. And just the same goes, with me. I mean, let's just keep brainstorming and keep in contact. I really love what you guys are doing, and I love it even more talking with you guys and seeing who you both are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, likewise. This has been awesome. This has been a nice little treat for the audience. It'd be funny for them to listen to Angie's voice in the beginning and then Angie's voice at the end.
Real excited.
You can tell she's passionate.
I love it. Good. That's what we need.
Yeah. We're not professional paid actors here. We're actually really
with human emotions.
Yeah.
If you could do that on command, you would be a top paid actress.
Yeah,
maybe that's my New Year's goal.
That's what I was just about to say. There's a revenue stream.
Yeah, a little acting on the side.
Yeah, done. Easy. Awesome.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have an amazing day. Go spend some time with your young child and
battle with your child.
Get some sleep maybe. Yeah.
Time battles.
Yeah, fun.
I will. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, see you later.